So today we're at the NASCAR Hall of Fame in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I haven't been back here since January. Got inducted into the 2020 NASCAR Hall of Fame with Buddy Baker, Tony Stewart, Joe Gibbs. It's been an amazing year. It was an amazing event, and it's been an amazing year to be a part of it. So coming back here today, looking at the cases that they have built around and inside the Hall of Fame, and especially with one of my favorite cars that I raced for Joe Gibbs, which he got inducted, and my teammate Tony Stewart. It was fun. It was a great induction. So this car here especially, I was able to confiscate this after the event, or after the seasons, a few seasons there, but I won my first race in this car. So it's a Chevrolet Monte Carlo. So this Interstate Battery Chevrolet, when I went to drive for Joe Gibbs, funny story is Dale Jarrett drove this car the year before. He didn't like it. I got in it, I finished second, and won 3 races in it. I'm like, I'm not sure why he didn't like this car, but I love this car. This was my favorite car. So it's nicknamed Little Joe after Joe Gibbs. And so when I got in it and went to drive for Joe, finished second in it, like I said, won my first race in it, won 3 races with it total. And so, like I said, it's a Chevrolet Monte Carlo. 1995, so is circa, when you think about safety and you think about the way the cars are built today, this was definitely back in the day. And coil springs, shocks are, simple shocks and nothing like what we do see today, but an exciting car nonetheless. And it won. It was fast, and I loved it. So that's good enough for me. And what we really did in 95 and a little bit after that was we made these cars, as we always do, continue to make them better. So the bodies got better, the shocks got better, the springs got better. But back then, as far as a driver goes, there was times that I would sit there, and in the afternoons, we'd all work on the car somehow, some way. I actually had a wrench out. I would do something every now and then, not a lot. We've had engines apart, and I would help tear them apart. So when back even not that far back, but the driver a lot of times was kind of a part of the team tinkering with things, and that's what we did. So again, this car won some races. It's in my private collection, and it was really a proud moment to be able to have it here at the NASCAR Hall of Fame for the induction. So one thing you might not know about me was I owned my own race cars for many years before I started driving for Joe. And it was kind of one of those things where I was working for a race team, actually, and I was a mechanic for my brother's team, and I got fired. So when I got fired, I had a choice to make, either let's see, work on a car or race a car. So it was a perfect opportunity to say, well, let's just go racing. So I was able to come up through some local short tracks and gained a little bit here and a little bit there, and gained some traction, got sponsorship dollars. So I invested our money into a race team. So it was my own team, and I was able to run the Busch Grand National Series for years, but in 1991, actually won the championship driving for my own family. My dad worked for me. My brother was so supportive. He was my agent type of guy. I had 4 employees and myself, and we won that championship back in the day. So when I went to drive for Joe Gibbs a few years later, I sold him that team, actually. So that was probably the best thing that happened for me. Sold him the team, so I became more of a car owner. So my transition to coach was one of those things where I got into it and knowing in the back of my mind what it takes to run a race team. And he's been in it for a few years, but it actually helped me, I think, understand what he was going through as he was growing his team that I was driving for at the time. So anyway, so a lot of, when I look at this car, I think about the years prior to that to get to that point. So again, excitement for me to be able to drive for Joe, but really exciting for my family and to have a family team and to be able to be successful in the Busch Grand National Series. Let me tell you some things on this car that I really like and I want to share with you. So in 1995, again, driving a Chevrolet Monte Carlo, car built back then, beautiful. This is a state-of-the-art race car. And we didn't know a whole lot about aerodynamics. I say we didn't know a whole lot about it. We knew what things were, but we're always learning something week in and week out at a racetrack because we'd have to try it and see how it worked out in practice and then apply it to the race. We didn't have a lot of engineering back then. We had an Excel spreadsheet that would kind of give us a balance number, and that's what we worked with. So there wasn't an engineering firm that we used, and to help us with that. But we were always gaining on it. What I loved about this time was that we would try something, and the crew chief could say, Jimmy Maycar would say, how was that? And I'd say, I think it was better. I had to look on the stopwatch. Well, it was better. All right, good. So we might race that, or we might change it back. So on this particular car, the front end didn't have a splitter like you see nowadays. So the way the front end of the valence was, you'd like to have it lower to the ground. Well, I can say there's times now I look back and I go, we didn't have it low enough, but we didn't know any better. So we were really doing the best with what we had, and we would come up with things at different times that was like, oh my gosh, we'd pick up 2/10 and we'd win. And then sometimes other teams would pick up 3/10 and we'd lose. So it was fun because we were always trying stuff on the racetrack, and it wasn't something that somebody thought up in the engineering department. One thing about this car that's different than today, still has the same 358 cubic inch small block engine, but this car here had a carburetor, so naturally aspirated, not fuel injected like they are today. We had Unical gas in it, and unleaded. We'd stop at the gas pump in the garage area, they'd fill it up, and you go run. Pretty simple stuff, and you didn't have to have a computer to read it. You had a guy that looked at the spark plugs and go, I think we need to put more jet or take some jet out. And I look at them too and I go, sounds good to me. So that was a lot of fun back then. You don't see any cars in the Cup Series nowadays with carburetors. It's all fuel injected. But again, at the time, this is what we had, and we definitely made it work, and that's what everybody had too. A couple things I want to tell you also about this era of car is back here at the back behind the Shell logo, above the Interstate logo, there's 3 holes in the window. And you think, well, what are those holes for? Again, this is things that we learned in a wind tunnel, things that people thought of that said, let's try this. And these vents right there would actually pull air from underneath the car. And so we would have those on both sides, and it's like that was not an advantage, but it was something that some teams figured out, some teams didn't know about. And, placement of that. So we called them, they were sucking air out from underneath the car. And it's a big car. It's not an Indy car. It's not a road racing car. But it would suck air out from underneath and get the car down. So that was like one step further into saying, we pick up a little bit here and there. Another duct goes through that blows air out. Could come to the driver. So a lot of different, I wouldn't say shenanigans, but we were playing with trying to figure out how to make the car go faster. People thought of this, tried it, and it worked, so we kept doing it. And then, of course, NASCAR makes a rule and says you can't only have but 2 instead of 5. So as we always do, we always push things to the edge. Another thing on this era car, when you go to the back, was the spoiler. Back then, we didn't have a set rule. We just kind of run the spoiler wherever you need to run it at. Sometimes it'd be higher, sometimes they made a rule later on. But what the engineer that we had back at this time and a little bit later, we started working with rear sway bars. We started working with rear springs. And I'll never forget at Michigan Speedway, where I won with this car, my brother asked me, he says, what kind of springs do you have in it? So I said, well, I tell my brother the truth because it's my brother. So I said, well, I've got, X, Y, Z, and we'll go back to an A, B, C, D, E, A, B, C, D, 4 springs. He said, I got A, B, C, D. I said, well, you've got more spring in one corner than I got in all 4 together. So we were onto something. I thought, either I'm going to be bad or you're going to be bad. So funny thing was, I lapped him during the race, but we were trying so many different things back in that day, again, we didn't have a fleet of engineers, we just had a couple. So we were working on things, trying to figure out what to do. And I remember winning a few races going, I'm not sure this is going to work, but it did. So we were always trying to get the car collapsed down, further down. We knew that was faster, but you couldn't do it with the body. You can make panels, but they had rules, but we knew that you can get the car lower. And I look back at some pictures and videos now and I go, we didn't do good enough. Other people did. So that was always a fun challenge back in that time. Again, we were doing it on the track, trying to figure it out at a test, and it wasn't something that somebody said, here, try this. So good times, good stuff like that. A lot of the stuff is the same about NASCAR. But one thing that I want to tell you about is if you can peek in here and you think about the steering wheel, you think about a window net, you think about roll bar padding, you think about the safety of this. So from 2000 to now, the safety has come forward, I don't know how many fold, 100-fold. So now back then we had seats that were not full containment. Now they're full containment seats, carbon fiber. There's specific foam. There is safety. we have been through the safety measurements with Dean Sickens in Nebraska, crashing cars, soft walls, you name it. It's been one of the greatest things to see the safety come out in NASCAR. And so when you look at this car, and I look at it today, as I walk up to it, I go, I cannot believe that seat. I raced in that seat. And I know that in all racing, that you probably can look back in all forms of racing and say the same thing. But one thing about this car is it really didn't change on the inside, and the outside roll cage changed a little bit. But the seat is a big change. Carbon fiber, either aluminum, full containment. Steering wheels have changed. Pedals have changed. The dash has changed. Everything's changed, and especially as far as safety equipment goes. So again, when I look at this car or look at a newer car, you go, I think I want to drive that seat. I don't want to drive this one anymore because I'm going to get hurt. But anyway, that was what we did. That's all we knew back then, and that's what we raced with. And everybody had the same thing, but we all got better at it.